The Trump administration has expressed great interest in using tariffs as policy tools and as political leverage. Since January, the administration has imposed tariffs on virtually all products that originate from certain countries and on specific products like steel and aluminum. So far, prescription drugs have largely been spared, but that might not last. President Trump has stated several goals for the use of tariffs: moving manufacturing jobs back to the US, limiting the offshoring of profits by branded manufacturers, and national security, protecting US supply chains from adversarial actions by other countries. So, how would that work when it comes to prescription drugs? Imagine that there are two manufacturing facilities, one in the US and one abroad. And imagine that foreign drugs are less expensive, so the foreign company has a larger share of the market. If a tariff is applied to the foreign-made drug, that drug will become more expensive for US consumers, and those consumers will begin buying the domestic product. As demand shifts towards domestic drug makers, they will increase their capacity and build new facilities. All this creates new jobs, limits the offshoring of profits, and protects the supply chains from geopolitical risks. That sounds great in theory, but the reality is much more complicated. Let's start with what it actually takes to onshore. Here's how executives will think through the decision to build a new drug manufacturing plant in the US. As with any large capital investment, executives will weigh the benefits of having a US plant against the cost of building and then running that plant. Before tariffs, foreign profits are higher than potential domestic profits, so there isn't much of an appetite for building in the US. But when a tariff is placed on foreign products, the foreign profits drop. The higher the tariff, the stronger the incentive to consider building in the US. So far, so good. The tariff makes US-based production attractive, but let's consider the cost of building a drug manufacturing plant. That is not cheap. Plants can cost more than $1 billion, and that's before we account for tariffs on steel. Building a new drug manufacturing plant also takes 3 to 5 years to complete, sometimes more. And time is money, so profits a few years from now are valued less than profits next year. There is no guarantee that tariffs will last. In other words, will tariffs even be in place after the facility is built? All these factors mean that we won't see many new facilities built in the next several years. We might not even see many construction projects started. So what happens in the meantime? The answer is, it depends on the drug. Tariffs will not really affect some drugs. For example, saline is made domestically with inputs likely not to be sourced from abroad. But if a drug is primarily made in foreign countries, there will be upward price pressure because there is not enough domestic capacity. But here's a problem. Manufacturers, both domestic and foreign, are limited by various regulations in how much they can increase price. These price cap regulations create a different challenge for branded drugs and generic drugs. Branded drugs are protected by patents and can carry high profit margins. In these situations, a drug may have a $5,000 price tag, but its cost of goods sold may only be $100. When such drugs run into price caps in various government programs, tariffs will mean big losses. In fact, the threat to the high margins is what will motivate the onshoring. But price caps create a different problem for low-margin generic drugs. Yes, the drug may only cost patients $4 for a 30-day supply, and a 25% tariff is only $1. But what if the profit on the drug is 40 cents? If the price cap limits price increases for a large enough market segment, the drug manufacturer will lose money. That means zero incentive for onshoring the drug, and more importantly, zero incentive for staying in the US market. Limited domestic capacity means drug shortages. Long story short, tariffs can work as an onshoring strategy if entry into the US market is both inexpensive and can occur quickly, but neither is true for prescription drugs. Even worse, various drug pricing regulations may make some generic drugs unprofitable enough, prompting the manufacturers to pull them from the market completely. In recent decades, we have seen that generic drug markets are not resilient, and production disruptions create shortages. So the higher the tariffs, the greater the drug shortages. Having said all that, strengthening U.S. drug supply chains is an important policy goal. The U.S. government can and should be actively working against the economic forces that have been making our generic drug supply chains unreliable. But tariffs should not be the primary tool used in achieving that goal. Instead, they should be used selectively as a strategic supplement to other policies. For a more detailed analysis of drug tariffs and other proposals for improving drug supply chain reliability, visit brookings.edu or click on the link below.